Alright, the updates are back. So, first thing I'm going to show you is a rather big book thing that relates to Marvel. The story of Marvel Studios. I don't think that this was released by DK, but I put it next to most of that stuff. It's always tough to separate these. Right, so I'm only going to show you the innards of one of these, but this is a book that isn't just an art book. It's actually a pretty detailed text thing that goes from the original Iron Man movie all the way to I'm pretty sure it's Endgame. I don't think that it includes the one or two movies that came after Avengers Endgame that concluded that particular phase, but Endgame more or less wrapped up that huge storyline anyway, and just a nice little thing to add to all these film books that I've got about the Marvel movies and all that stuff. Okay, I can move in. Now, close you. Alright. Now, these were books that I didn't think I would end up getting, but I ended up, going on a bit of a craze with this franchise, so I'm like, okay, might as well get everything in this franchise that I don't have, so I got the couple of audiobooks that I was missing, and then I got just about every book about the movies in this franchise that I could get. So, first I picked up Twilight, the Director's Notebook, which is a book that Catherine Hardwicke put out that details a bunch of facts about the movie and little things like this. For what it is, I'll admit that it is kind of overpriced, but it is possible to find it online kind of cheap. Yeah, like when I was younger, I would have thought that this kind of thing was stupid. Now, less stupid, I'll give you that. This doesn't have anything to do with the movies, but it was the only book that there is no audio for because it's not a real book. And that's all I'm going to say on this, other than the fact that it's pretty hard to get this, regardless if it's paperback or hardback. And then I picked up the 4 books that detail I got these in reverse order, I know, the films and various things related to them. You get to learn a decent amount of stuff. Some of it doesn't mean much, but other parts of it, they're not bad. But now you're probably going, but wait a second. 4 books, but there's 5 movies. Well, there was supposed to be one for Break It Down Part 2, but then they decided not to do it, and instead they came out with this instead, which, just to give you an idea of what this one is like, not as big of a fan of this, but, again, I was in a bit of a craze with this franchise, so I grabbed everything that I could. I'm a completist, Okay, right, so I'm gonna put, haven't got the greatest amount of space to work with. And then, finally, because this existed and I found it for a decent price, the graphic novel for the first book. And this is pretty hard to get in its complete form, especially with the back jacket or whatever the heck that's called. But what's interesting is that if you were to take this off, you would see the pictures that are for the individual volumes done together. They did come out with a volume 1 for the second book, but then they oddly never finished it. Not that it matters, because this first one is the only book or movie in the franchise that I think I truly can throw myself behind in saying that it's good. And while a lot of it's done in black and white, fast forward to, just a little too far. Well, there's some bits in a flashback where, it's not the greatest example I know, but there is a little bit of color, but there's something about this style that I do like. Yeah. Okay. Speaking of graphic novels, I also picked up the graphic novel for Speak. So now I've got the book, the movie, the graphic novel, and also the HD remastered / upscaled version that they have for streaming, because a lot of these older movies that you can find in 1080p on the streaming, I honestly am willing to bet that they've been upscaled rather than properly remastered. But studios, they want to cut expenses everywhere they can in this age of corporate greed, and far too many people are like, oh, well, if it's not in HD, then I don't want to watch it. Oh, jeez. You really need to educate yourselves on quality. Not the biggest fan of this art style, but it's not bad. Then, this is something that I saw when I was younger, didn't really grasp the concept of it, but then I just remembered it randomly and decided to pick it up. So it's basically a novelization of Jim Carrey's Grinch movie, told from the Grinch's point of view, as you can see right there. But, there's sometimes that it shifts to third-person bits for other people, kind of like the Bartimaeus books, where Bartimaeus' bits are always told for the first person, everything else is told for the third person. This is something that I picked up, and it was tough to find, and I kind of regret this because literally right after I bought it, I found a PDF of it. Did some skimming of said PDF, and I came to realize that there probably isn't that much to this work than I was originally thinking. The Paper Chase. My dad showed me the movie when I was like starting high school, I want to say, and it was a nice movie, though I didn't get some of the discussions that the main characters would have. Then I rewatched it a couple years back, really enjoyed it, so it made me want to check out the other parts of this franchise. But looking at this book, I come to realize, even though of course there are going to be some differences and a few things that are more fleshed out, it seems like the movie adopted a lot of scenes almost word for word. So, still make an interesting video, though, even though it may not be the greatest. Okay. Now, these next two that I'm going to show you are books that I had when I was younger and that I looked at all the time despite being a little too young to fully understand what was in these books, but one day I just all of a sudden remembered them and I'm like, I really want to get these back. So, I picked up DK's Dinosaur Encyclopedia book, which is a book, as I said, that I looked at a lot when I was younger, but it doesn't just talk about dinosaurs, okay? It actually talks about most of recorded history when it comes to fossils, because you got something down that's before the dinosaurs, something that occurred after the dinosaurs. Get back now. Dinos. But they also talk about the air and the sea creatures that existed during the dino periods too, along with big extinctions, because towards the back of this they've got at least I thought they had a timeline back here. Yes, they do. Permian period right there, and then continental positions at the time. Nice little reference guide. and this is the other one that I looked at when I was younger. Basically the same thing, but a little more to the point in terms of the text. But, yeah, I was just all over this when I was younger. It would be nice to read it now that I can actually fully grasp everything that was in there, even though I got a decent amount of it back then. Now this next one, it's a book that I already had, but I wanted to get it in a better cover because the first cover for this book was just honestly a really bad cover. I don't know what the hell they were thinking when they put out that cover, but the second edition was the DVD cover expanded, and the third one, which is the one that I got, is the Blu-ray cover expanded. Yeah, now we're talking. And I'm not going to show you the image of this because it's the exact same as the other edition that I showed you. It's just a different cover, but a much better looking cover than what I had before. I'm so glad that I upgraded that. Oh wow, I might actually be able to get this done in one pod. That's nice. Let's see. Continuing with the Ray Dalio book collection, he put out a new book called How Countries Go Broke, and I'd be willing to bet that this more or less concludes what he wanted to do in terms of discussing economic principles, because originally he was just going to come out with two books, Life and Work Principles and Economic Principles, but I guess he realized that there was either too much to do for one book or that it would just be more relevant to split it all up into multiple books, which is what I think he has done, especially since lately he's been talking about putting out like online AI refresher courses, that kind of a thing, and then an app. So I wouldn't be too surprised if that's the last book that he puts out for a good long while, until the concept of the American empire / revert currency collapsing does occur. But I also decided to pick up his other books, even though there's not that much to these ones. You got Principles, the Guided Journal, which, as you can imagine, is more of a guidebook to write your own stuff. Oh, there's some text in there, but most of it is just blank or stuff that you put your own little bit of things to do there. And then this book, it's really just a picture book that explains what the first part of his Life and Work Principles is about. It's just outlining that concept. He has a YouTube video that is basically him reading this book along with illustrations. Some of you might prefer that instead. So this is actually a compendium of smaller DK books for these movies, because when I was younger I had most of those smaller ones, and they all had different covers than this, because the one for the original trilogy, they did the original trilogy as one book. It had Darth Vader as the centerpiece. Then episode 1, I think we had that for a while, then we lost it. I think it had Queen Amidala, episode 2 had Jango, and then episode 3 had General Grievous. Well, this is all 4 of those put back in here, and I'm pretty sure that it's literally the exact same pages, because at the beginning of episode 1 I saw this and I'm like, that looks mighty familiar. And once you get to episode 3, if I can get there fast enough for this, Probably not. Yeah. You can't probably read that because of this being a standard def camera, but there's a little blurb right there. I distinctly remember that exact blurb word for word from the book that I had when I was younger. Now, you're probably wondering, did they do those things for the sequel trilogy? Yep, they did. And they even put out a new compendium, kind of. Because if you get the version of that has like R2-D2 on it, it'll say that it's for episodes 1 through 8 done in chronological order. But apparently they added a couple of things and then they took out some stuff. And also Rise of Skywalker isn't included because they put out the compendium before Rise of Skywalker came out. They since put out a Rise of Skywalker book, but they've never re-released the compendium to include that. So, I don't know, I might get that other compendium, but I don't really have that much interest in reading about the sequel trilogy stuff, but who knows? Maybe down the line I'll be a little more kind on the sequel trilogy because, as I've said before, I fully expect Star Wars to be rebooted while I'm alive, so maybe I'll just regard it as one story. This is one of these like old Lucasfilm books that they put out when I was younger, but this is the only one that I think I read cover to cover, and I was really lucky I was able to find this in such good condition because this really is an amazing book. Because not only does it do a good job of telling you the Legends timeline as it existed in like, I don't know, 2006 or something like that, but it does a great job of explaining all that stuff, and you even get little bits of art in there that I don't think you can get in like any place else, because like this image of Malak, and then I think that's Bastila in chains in the background, that doesn't exist anyplace else. It's really quite good. So it details everything from like the beginning of the Jedi Order all the way to the the Dark Nest trilogy. But it doesn't describe the legacy of the Force, Fate of the Jedi, Star Wars Old Republic, and whatever lost tribe of Sith that gets mentioned, you know? But it's still a great wealth of material that was completely on point at the time that it came out. Yeah. Alright. Now these magazines, I'm just going to do a speed run of these because there's not much to this. Not actually a fan of this band, but I am curious as to the history of it, so when I saw it, I'm like, yeah, I'll grab it. Sometimes, if I don't know much about a product, but I think the history will be interesting, I'll do that. SpongeBob, because it actually does a good job of explaining how the show came to be and a couple things like that. Rest in peace, man. Wizard of Oz, the movie. Definitely a franchise that's a little bit more worthy of being investigating. Muppets. Get this. I didn't know that this predates Sesame Street until I got this. Shocking. He's still alive! He's still alive! No! Come on, you knew I had to get this. Only really talks about the first movie. I think the others are just thrown on there as a throwaway line. This is a more text-based bit than the other one that I think I might have shown you before. Or rest in peace to you too, man. Nice little brief summary bit, and it even talks about the Eastern Empire. This is more for people that have seen the show, because if you haven't seen the show, it's going to tell you all kinds of stuff that you might not like to know, but it's a show that I'm a big fan of. Okay, so these I'm actually going to put back on the stack. Be right back. Okay, we're almost done. There's only a couple left to show you. Now, this next book requires a bit of an explanation. So what this book is that somebody who has apparently consumed every bit of Star Wars media in the pre-Disney era of other Star Wars material, read, reread, played the games and all that stuff, and then eventually came out with a step-by-step timeline as to when all these things occur. Hey, doesn't Wikipedia do that? It kind of, because say that you've got a short story compilation like Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina, Jabba's Palace, etc. It'll just put in general when that compilation occurs. It doesn't do like story by story timeline. Likewise, there's a couple of comic book issues that take place at a different timeline than the rest, but Wikipedia only does the story arc. Well, this does bit by bit. And it's really quite detailed, because say that there's multiple things going on, this guy just breaks it down bit by bit. Literally, you could not ask for a more complete timeline. But just an update. If you're going, well, hey, where is Star Wars The Clone Wars? The author put this at the back, because apparently there's like two different Clone Wars timelines. I really can't describe it more than that. He also put in tons of footnotes. But this isn't actually something that Lucasfilm approved. This is a fan-made project that he did on his own, and he ends up getting released. So everybody that you see talking about this goes, if you want this, make sure you buy it right now, because you might not be able to do it down the line. So I got two. And I know that there's PDFs of this out there, but I just can't find them. That's kind of annoying. But I'm really glad that that exists, because it's something that I think a lot of us fans needed. And finally, you might recall when I was talking about the Taschen books, that there was one big addition to those books that I wanted to have, but it just seemed unlikely that they were ever going to come out with it. Well, they finally came out with the $100 editions for the Star Wars Archive books. Took them longer to release the second one than they were expecting, but they finally did. Awesome. However, right before I learned that these were coming out, I found a good deal on eBay, which caused me to bite the bullet. So I ended up grabbing the really big versions of these books. Although, have a bit of buyer's remorse going on here, because these are obviously so much tougher to handle than the editions that I've got on my lap, and also they've got glitter on the books, and depending on what kind of fabric you've got underneath, it may or may not come off. Like, I tried to get rid of it myself and nothing happened. However, the good news is that these, oh, for crying out loud, these shelves stick. These XXL editions are basically in immaculate condition, so if I wanted to get rid of them, I mean, I'd definitely be selling these at a loss, but I could definitely get them to some people out there. Now, since I got these huge editions, they've seemed to have put out the 40th edition version of these books. I'm only going to show you the original trilogy book, because that's the only one of these that's out there. It seems like Costco has put these out in a version that's got dimensions that are similar to the trade edition, as these ones on my lap are called, but it's still just the 40th edition. But it's also split into like 3 volumes, so just imagine 2 lines coming down here. So it's a nice way of getting these to be bigger, but it's the same exact content. There's also a picture book that Paul put out for the Star Wars books and the James Bond book. So, I don't know, I might grab those too. I really don't know why. Because it's a little silly at this point. But I mean, like, because I knew that I'd be able to replace these in case they ever get torn up, and because I knew they'd be so much easier to handle, I was without question going to get these. Because I mean, like, yeah, you just see how easy it is for me to turn and flip these around, you know, compared to those XXL ones that are like 33% bigger and twice the weight. Yeah, but Star Wars is something that I care about, and I found those for a good deal. I paid basically the price of one of those XXL ones retail to get them both. Whatever. I'll figure it out. Okay, hey, that catches you up on all the books that I've got. On to the main event.